So let's now implement through the private class fields and methods. So private class fields and methods are actually part of a bigger proposal for improving and changing JavaScript classes, which is simply called class fields. Now this class fields proposal is currently at state 3. And so right now it's actually not yet part of the JavaScript language. However, be at state 3 means that it's very likely that at some point it will move forward to the state number 4. And then it will actually become a part of the JavaScript language. And that's probably gonna happen some point soon in the future. And in fact, some parts of this proposal actually already work in Google Chrome, but other parts don't. At least not at the time of recording this video. Now for the starter, why is this proposal actually called class fields? Well, in traditional OOP languages like Java and C++, properties are usually called fields. So what this means is that with this new proposal, JavaScript is moving away from the idea that classes are just synthetic sugar over constructor functions. Because with this new classes features, classes actually start to have abilities that we didn't previously have with the constructor functions. Now, too many developers consider this to be a big problem, but personally, I'm not sure if it is such a big deal for the average JavaScript developer. So as long as you still understand how prototype inheritance and function constructors work, then I believe that you will be fine. But anyway, no matter if you end up using these new class features, let's now start exploring them. And so in this proposal, there are actually 4 different kinds of fields and methods. And actually it's even 8. But in this video, I'm just gonna focus on these 4, and that is public fields, that is private fields, and then we have public methods and we have private methods. So essentially there is public and a private version of both fields and methods. And let's now start with the public fields. So we can think of a field as a property that will be on all instances. So that's why we can also call this a public instance fields. So basically in our example here, the 2 fields could be the movements and the locale, because these are basically 2 properties that are gonna be on all the objects that we create with this class, because we didn't pass any of value here and so into the constructor. And so this array in this language, they will always be set for all the instances, right? And so let's now add them as a public field. So that was simply like this. We can say locale equal and then navigator.language. And then here, we actually need to write a semicolon, which is kind of weird because between this method, we do not need commas or semicolons. So what's also weird is that this kind of looks like a variable here. But we don't have to declare it using like cons or let. So this is how we simply define a public field. So let's write that here. So public fields, and the other one is gonna be this movement. So I will still for now call it underscore movements. And so I'm setting it to this empty array now. And so when we reload this, now you will see the authentic code here worked exactly the same. So we still have the locale here and also the movements, but now they are actually public fields. But then our final object here, that doesn't make any difference, because again these public fields here are gonna be presented on all the instances that we are created through the class. So they are not on the prototype. So this is important to understand. So all these methods that we add here, they always be added to the prototype. But again the fields here, they are on the instances. Let me write that here as well. And so again, having this here is exactly the same as this. And so therefore, these public fields, they are also referenceable by the this keyword. And they are also referenceable via the this keyword. So this is public fields. Next up, let's talk about the private fields. So private field is the one that we have actually been waiting for. So with the private fields, we can now make it so the properties are really truly not accessible from the outside. So let's start by now finally making the movements array private. So let's move it here. And now I will remove the underscore. And then I will use the hash symbol. And so this is the syntax that makes a field private in this new class proposal. So let's try and reload to see what happens now. And indeed, we get some error. And the reason for that is that the property is now really called a hash movements. So we need to change that everywhere. Now that's it. So let's see here we now actually have the movements in this array, which is called the hash movements. Now basically, and so now we're finally gonna be able to see that this property is indeed protected. So if we try to read account1.hashMovements, then we get a syntax error. So private field movements must be declared in an enclosed class. So basically JavaScript thinks that I'm trying to implement this private class field out here. And that's the reason for this error. But what matters is that in fact we cannot access this variable outside here. And of course the movement property from before no longer exists. So we get undefined error. Now the error message here might look different for you by the time that you watch this video, because as I said, this proposal at the time of the recording is not really finished yet, and so some implementation details might stay changed, and so that might also affect the error message here. And speaking of implementation, I believe that right now only Google Chrome actually supports this private class field. And so make sure to also test your code in Google Chrome. But anyway, the movements are now truly private and no longer accessible outside here, at least not by your property. We do still have of course this method here in our public API, and so this one can still use to gather movement. So that's right here. And that was indeed the whole point of creating this method in the first place. Now the next candidate to make it private is this pen. So in the last video we protected it, but now just like the movements, we want to convert it to a truly private field. However, this type situation is a bit different because now we actually setting the pen based on this input value to the constructor. How about we cannot define a field set in the constructor? So the fields, they really have to be out here outside of any method. So what I have to do is to create the field out here. So the private field again with the hash, and then don't set it to anything. And so this is essentially just like creating an empty variable. So in the beginning, this will be set to undefined. And then here, we can redefine that value basically. So one more time we can see that these class fields are really just like any other property. That's why later down here, we can access it on this keyword and set it to the value that we receive. So let's try that. And indeed, the pen here is now also a protected field, actually a private field. So when we try to access it, we will no longer be able to do that, you see? Indeed. So that is truly private class field. And again, these are going to be available on the instances themselves, so not on the prototype. And so yes, of course, that's why we have them right here in the instance. Next up, we have public methods. And actually, that is nothing new at this point. And so all these methods here, that we have been using are indeed public methods. And so this case, there's not a lot to talk about. And in fact, we have already written something similar here. So see that all of these methods together are basically the public interface of our class. And so therefore, let's move on to our final point here, which is a private method. So let's do that down here. And private methods, as we already mentioned earlier, are very useful to hide the implementation details from the outside. And that's why in the previous video, we already made this method and protected with this underscore. And so let's now grab this, put it down here. And now to make a private method, the syntax is exactly the same as private field. So just like with the hash, let's change that here as well. And remove this. We don't get any error actually. So let's see what we have here. So indeed here we have the approved load now. So I guess that right now Google Chrome simply make this method like a private field. So that's why it no longer appear in the prototype. So it's not here. But now it is instead on the instance. So that's not really what we want. So let's just test if we can access it out here. So console log account one dot approved load with some value. As you see, show error. And then we get the same error as before. So private fields approved low. So Google Chrome right now basically see this as a private class field, not as a method. And so that's why I'm saying that the methods are not really yet implemented in Google Chrome. So private methods are not available. And so just let me leave it as a comment. But I will go back to simply protected with the underscore convention. So at some point in the future, this will work, but for now, let's leave it just as it was before. And so we talk about these four features here. So public fields, private fields, public method, private method. Now beside these four, there are also static version of the same form. Actually, we have a new features. So there's also the static version. And actually we already used the static public methods before, and so that work by the simply adding the static keyword in front of it. And so just static and then some method name. And so usually we use this for helper functions. So these static methods will not be available on all the instances, but only on the class itself. So the static one here only works like this. So account.helper. There's also a static functions for all the other three ones, but they are really less important. And that's actually it. So this is how we implement encapsulation and data privacy using this new class fields proposal.